Our second scripture is Luke chapter 16, verses 10 through 14, and you can find that on page 79 in the New Testament section of your pew Bibles if you'd like to follow along. Jesus said, "Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." The Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all this, and they ridiculed him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So about this time last year, my daughter Rachel and I were sightseeing in Japan. I was on sabbatical, and we had finished up the South Korea portion of our trip, and we spent several days each in Tokyo and Kyoto, cramming in as many sights and sounds as we possibly could. We saw ancient, breathtaking shrines. We saw beautiful gardens. We spent hours in museums filled with such interesting things we could easily have spent the whole time just doing that. We rode those really high-speed trains, those bullet trains. When we finally got to where my uncle and aunt live, after all the sights we saw, we were then thrilled to find out they actually live on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. So we had these 180-degree views of the ocean. So everywhere we went, there was something amazing to see. And with all of that, one of the most memorable things that sticks out to me about my trip to Japan is the bathrooms. I entertained my dinners for 8 guests last Sunday night by describing in great detail the sophistication of the toilets called washlets that you find in Japanese bathrooms. They have multiple buttons and controls allowing you to heat the seat, to adjust the water spray direction and intensity in order to appropriately clean the appropriate parts of yourself, and multiple options for blowing yourself dry when you are all done. And I'm not making this up, in the public spaces like airports and train stations and museums, the toilets actually have buttons for a little sound system called the Sound Princess that you can press to choose a sound to cover up any noise you might make. And there are options for these sounds. The newest ones even have an ozone deodorant system that quickly eliminates odors. And then the lids have sensors in them, so they automatically open and gently close, and you never have to touch them. Along with their high-tech toilets, Japanese bathrooms are also extremely clean. I mean clean. The least clean public restroom that we used in Japan was still cleaner than the nicest ones I have ever used in the United States. And it wasn't just because of their technology, it was the way each person using the restroom was committed to leaving it as clean or cleaner than they found it. Everybody does their part. In fact, each person carries around their own hand towel with them when they're out and about. So there are no paper towels and there's no trash cans. Everybody, you just expect to bring your own towel. Today is part 3 of our message series, Little Things That Make a Big Difference. When we are faced with big challenges that feel overwhelming and impossible, it helps to focus on the little things we can do. God sees and values the little things we do, from offering a cup of cold water to someone on a hot day to offering words of encouragement to someone who is struggling. In the passage we heard from the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says, "Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much." Now, Jesus said this right after telling a parable about a dishonest manager, the story Herman alluded to in his children's moment. A dishonest manager who finds a clever way to create a safety net for himself when the rich man he's working for discovers his dishonesty. And that parable has a message for another day, but this saying of Jesus is true across the board, that the way we behave with little things is how we behave with the big things. Who we are when no one is watching is who we are. And what we do with the little things reveals our character. So what Rachel and I saw during our time in Japan was people who place a high value on the common good and show this in lots of little ways. They know how to patiently wait in line. They speak very, very softly or not at all, generally not at all, on public transportation in order to maintain a quiet environment for everybody else. You would never find somebody carrying on a loud conversation on their cell phone on the subway or the train. It would be unthinkable. And they don't litter. There's no trash anywhere. So you recall that back in January, a Japan Airlines passenger plane collided with a Coast Guard plane while landing at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, and the passenger plane caught fire. I talked about this in a January sermon. Anyway, thanks to the design of the plane and the training of the crew, all 367 passengers and crew members got off the plane safely in 90 seconds. 90 seconds. The crew was so well trained, and they managed to communicate with the passengers even when the intercom system stopped functioning. But another factor that surely made a difference is that the passengers did not panic even as the plane filled with smoke and made it difficult to see and to breathe. All of them followed the instructions to leave their bags behind. And this kept the aisles clear and allowed people to exit quickly. I've often wondered if one of the reasons they were able to follow directions so well in a crisis is because of all the little ways that I observed people in Japan putting the good of the group first in everyday life, like leaving bathrooms cleaner than they found them. One little thing we can do that makes a big difference is to embrace the attitude of leaving things better than we found them. That's actually a really concrete way of loving our neighbors. Doing this when everybody's watching, doing it when nobody's watching, and doing it with the littlest and simplest of things. I've often joked, although it's not really a joke, that one of the reasons I was drawn to my late husband, Rod, when we were dating, is that he always used correct spelling and punctuation in his text messages. Always, always, always. He never got sloppy or cut corners. He didn't even abbreviate anything. And I thought, wow, if he can be faithful in little things like that, I bet he can be faithful to me. And sure enough, he was. Leaving things better than we found them includes leaving people better than we find them. Those of you who read the Topeka Capital Journal might have seen a little article yesterday by Connie Mason Kalis, where she wrote about her experience waiting on the phone to speak with a Social Security agent. Did anybody read this yesterday? She waited for 55 minutes and 26 seconds. Michaelis decided that instead of reinforcing the stereotype of older people as grouchy and stubborn, she was going to put herself in the shoes of the person on the other end of the phone whose job is to solve people's problems all day. And she decided that she was going to be the nicest person that agent would speak with all day. She transformed a frustration into a delightful experience and got her problem solved. She quotes Rabbi Harold Kushner, who said, "Do things for people not because of who they are or what they do in return, but because of who you are." Michaelis decided to leave someone better than she found them. And when we do that, we, as she discovered, are the ones who end up blessed. Leaving others better than we found them means two things: that we assume the best about others and we give our best to others. If someone comes to the church during the week and they ask for assistance, which is happening more and more, we do not assume that they are trying to take advantage of anybody or making the rounds to see which church will give them the most. For a number of reasons, we never give out money, but we do offer a small bag of food and a bottle of water to nourish them enough to get to a place that is better equipped to offer more help. We strengthen them for the next stop. And we speak to each person respectfully, even when we have to say no to something, which we often do. When Jesus encountered people, he didn't always give them what they wanted, but he did leave them better than he found them. What if we brought the commitment to leaving things better than we found them to everything we do? How would it change the way we relate to our families? How would it affect the way we interact with people when we're shopping, playing sports, eating dinner, waiting in line, or even just driving around Topeka when traffic is heavy and your favorite road to get somewhere is closed for repairs? Raise your hand if this has not happened to you yet. What if you are homebound and dependent on other people to care for you? Can you leave people better than you found them by the way that you ask for and receive help? What about leaving our church better than we found it for future generations? What would that look like? Our new elders get to wrestle with that on session. And what if we could make sure that every human being who comes into this building leaves feeling more blessed when they came in? Our deacons get to do that, but that's the job of all of us, isn't it? This week, as you reflect on your life and the people in it, ask God to show you one little thing, one little way that you can practice leaving things better than you found them. And then do that little thing, trusting that your faithfulness in that little thing just might make a big, big difference.